So you guys think maybe there's some alternatives out there in terms of how you get food supply, both at maybe the retail system, the restaurant systems, and in actuality, there's a lot of changes that we are in the midst of as we kind of go through this crisis. A lot of things are changing. My name is Paul Barron, and this is the Barron Report. We're going to talk to a couple of guys here today that are exploring an old art called foraging, and it's something that's been around the food industry for decades, if not eons, and they are taking it to a new level. I've got with me Mr. David Stone, the founder of Forager, and then also the CEO, Joe Blunda. Great to have you guys on the show.
Great to be here.
All right, so let's get into it, guys. Let's talk a little about Forager, the app and the concept, and kind of tell me what you guys are up to. What's the magic sauce you're putting together there?
As you probably know, and as your listeners, viewers know, local food has become the number one product that consumers look for when they go to the grocery store. 93% of consumers actually look for it. And the trend is so strong now that upwards of 2/3 of people will actually switch grocery stores to find local food in season. So and while the demand is so high, local food as a percentage of our total consumption is somewhere around 3 to 4%. On average, I'm simplifying, and I'll just say a few more things, and then I'll quickly jump to the product solution. On average, I'm simplifying. We export 95% of the food we produce in a given locale, and import 95%. And our system was, coming out of World War II, big agriculture built the system on transporting shelf-stable products long distances through multiple distribution centers. You probably know all that. So when I started this company 6 years ago, if you can believe it, with a mission, really, where an impact to make locally sourced food more widely available to all. I did a lot of research, a lot of grants, put my own money in. And, if you're sourcing food, if you typically are working with a distributor in the grocery segment or the institutional segment, and it works okay, right? I mean, it's relatively easy. You call up your guy or gal, fax them, or you might even go on their online platform and order, your potatoes, your chickens. You might throw in a few organic things. If you want to work with small independent farms and there's no real system for it.
Right.
It's very labor intensive. You're basically calling them, emailing them, texting them, and it's difficult. So unless you're really, really committed to it, you're not going to do it, or you're going to do a poor job of it. And therefore, consumers aren't going to be able to get the freshest local food year round on the shelves because grocers, unfortunately don't do a great job of it.
Yeah, that's interesting because you made a couple of points there. Pretty astronomical numbers when you look at how much we're bringing in and then almost how much we're exporting out of our local markets, which makes absolutely no sense. So we have talked with people throughout the years here on the network that have attempted to go into the local systems, work at everything from access to farmers markets, farms that are direct to consumer, all those kind of things. And I want to talk to you about that. Joe, let's kind of jump to you and kind of talk a little bit about when you look at the kind of customer that Forager would try to appeal to. Is it more the supplier and the chain supply, or is it more from a true direct-to-consumer type product?
Well, today, Paul, it's a little bit more supplier or grocer focused. The reason we focus there today and have focused so far there for Forager is that 50% before pre-COVID of the food we ate came from a grocery store. And so as we try and deliver on our mission to increase the amount of local food available to consumers, grocers are a very important place to start. And of course, as COVID has hit and as restaurants unfortunately have been put in terrible positions of having to shut down for periods of time and having to struggle reopening, we see grocers continuing to be pretty central to the future of local food.
Yeah, and that's something that we continue to look at because there has been some psychological changes just in the habits of how we get to food. And that's been something that I've talked to a few experts that think this could be a long-term effect of bringing food back to the kitchen table, essentially. And that's a dynamic that the restaurant industry has spent almost 7, 8 decades trying to overcome.
Right.
And they just last year, for the first time, eclipsed the 50% mark for the first time in history.
Yeah.
And that was a big deal to get to 51% of food away from home. That seems to be a complete reverse, and we've lost maybe what could be 2 decades of growth in the restaurant industry that has flipped back over to the retail side. So there's a lot happening there. When you look at food deserts and food waste, because those are 2 big factors in both the restaurant and retail food centers out there in the world, talk to me a little bit about what you guys are seeing in terms of some of those trends.
Well, unfortunately, thanks, David. So unfortunately, Paul, what we experienced starting this spring in March and have seen going forward, and the story has been well told at the national scale, is this tragic disconnection between our food production and those who are going hungry. What happened, of course, this spring is a dramatic expansion of the number of people who are out of work and potentially going hungry in mere days. And so it brought that problem that had always been there in our food system to a much more acute status very quickly. Yeah. So what we believe at Forager, and what we have believed before this unfortunate turn of events, is that the local food supply chain has the potential to address these problems. Before COVID, you mentioned food deserts. Of course, there are hundreds of food deserts throughout the country. They are in locations that you might predict, and they're in locations that you would never predict, particularly locations near a lot of food production. And so that it's much more of a socioeconomic definition, unfortunately. And as we've come to understand this spring as well through other events, a racial definition in many cases. So it's an issue of justice. Yeah. And so we view all of these things as connected. And what we've been trying to say out in the public sphere, and what we've been trying to do at Forager as we address scaling the local food supply chain, is to connect all of these events and all of the stakeholders who are so passionate about fixing this problem together, and to work as one, and to work as one group. And that, as much as the core mission of increasing the amount of local food that's available to everybody, that is as much our mission, delivering on food justice.
Yeah, you hit on some good points there for sure. David, you were going to mention?
Yeah, Paul, are you familiar, and Joe can talk about this too. I mean, there are 2 points I want to make, but let me just make a point prior. So part of the reason why I focused on wholesale/retail as opposed to direct to consumer when I started the company, just to go back, and then we'll come back to the food justice thing, is farmers markets and direct to consumers got pretty saturated. And there really wasn't and direct to consumer food in general, excluding the meal delivery kits like Blue Apron, really less than 10% of the food we get. So if we're really going to make an impact and also open up markets for farmers, wholesale was the biggest opportunity for us. And that's why I chose to go that direction. Moving to the food desert thing, and Joe can embellish this. Joe built a program, and we got some grants with Gleaners. Are you familiar with Gleaners, Paul?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And there was a front page story in the New York Times last week, which mentioned us. And that program, which Joe will talk about, has enabled us to do more work around food justice, and specifically some very rich programs that Joe can talk about. That is giving access to less, to food, food challenged areas that need access to fresh food that is less expensive than local organic produce. And Joe, you should add to that the Gleaner program.
Yeah. Well, we've talked to a couple of executives in the past who have kind of focused on this. Sam Polk is one with Everytable that we've talked to before. And if you know a little bit about Everytable, they're kind of trying to bring localized, more fresh produces and things of that nature into inner city. Mostly Los Angeles, which is as you had mentioned, Joe, that mostly what you're dealing with is either racial or potentially socioeconomic impact, where these people, in most cases, the poorest communities, have access to the worst food. And that's something that is that what you're trying to solve?
That's what we have increasingly turned our attention to this spring. Yes, as a result of COVID, we, along with many of our peers in the local food space and the food supply chain, have felt an immediate obligation to use our technology and our skill set to address this problem. So what David was mentioning was the particular program we started to build with Gleaners. We tried to understand, we have commercial technology that's being used for local food. And so our immediate project this spring was to understand how that could graft onto the problem effectively and become part of the solution. We didn't want to do something others were doing. We wanted to help them do what they were doing using what we already had.
Right. David, I want to jump back to you because I want to unpack something that you mentioned there that I think is interesting. When you look at the industry over the past 5 months, obviously COVID related, there's been so many companies that have pivoted to both mail order and direct to consumer type goods, all the way down to the restaurant concepts who are now delivering grocery style boxes. With all of that happening, so you've got Amazon entering the space, you've got now all these acquisitions of food delivery who are looking at other ways to maximize their logistics systems and be able to get to those kinds of food delivery options that are out there. In many cases, those are packaged goods or specialty food products. With that buildup shoring up over here, at the same time where farms are now harvesting but have no market place to go to because of the processing facilities, things of that nature.
Right.
You know, we saw it in the meat industry. We've also seen it in the vegetable industry. Doesn't that seem to counterbalance what is actually happening in the industry right now, meaning food, is that food's becoming more available via a cardboard box on your doorstep, more so than other than retail? Or are you guys seeing there's some opportunity here to really bring the local markets back into the game?
Let me start, and then Joe can, as he does so well, embellish. So you know, we all tend to react to what is happening right in front of us, and we're really good at lagging indicators and not very good at seeing leading indicators. That's economists make their living on that. So if you stop and think about it for a minute, two concepts. So one is, if you're in the grocery industry, right? You know, famous line, you don't have to go to the grocery store anymore to buy groceries, right?
Right.
So, you know, you can buy everything online. You can buy all your shelf-stable products online. You have all of these grocery stores, you know, with massive amounts of square footage. And while direct to farms went up 800% during this period, in-store shopping went down 40%.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So what is it? Why will you go in? You know, what's the reason for you to go in a grocery store now? What is the reason you will go? The salad bars are closed. The beer drinking, the coffee bars, they're all closed. So our argument is to the grocer, and it's resonating, is local fresh food is one of the few ways that you can get people back into the store. When I started this company, I have 5 kids. My grandparents are farmers. Other story, if you have time, I can go into it. You know, increasingly, particularly Gen Z, more than anybody else, wants to have a relationship with their food. They want to know where it comes from. You know all this. They want to be able to smell it, touch it, experience it. You know, understand the authenticity. You know, if you get I sometimes buy from Whole Foods because I'm in my 60s, right? Get a bag of peaches from Whole Foods, you know, you probably don't know where it's coming from. It's probably conventional. So, you know, to allow the consumer to go in that store and experience is a very strong driver. It also, obviously, if the grocer has an online platform where they can see what's available anytime or in real time, when it can be delivered, what the price is, what the quality is, it is going to be so much easier for them to access that market than you know, trying to call a farmer in the middle of a pandemic, right? You know, so that's the direction we're heading. And we thought a lot and argued about it, you know, about going direct to consumer and pivot. And you know, my view is that you know, that again, if we're going to really have an impact, go to the places where consumers are going, and that will help the farmers more than any single effort that we do. And to your point about boxed, you know, I think it's important for, you know, it's become more important for safety and convenience. but it's still a box, right? It's still a box. And I just don't think you get that experience with a box delivered to your door. You get convenience. There's no question about it. But you don't get the selection, the activation of the senses, the experience of the farm and where your food is coming from.
Yeah, and definitely not the freshness. I'm a meal kit user, and I would say 20 to 30% of the product that comes in the meal kits, I won't mention the company's name, comes in a very late stage of the product's life cycle, and you end up with using product. I mean, if you go to a restaurant, you're getting the most premium product, because I've done some of these grocery kits from restaurants, and I'm just amazed at the difference of quality between what I get there versus what I get over at Publix, which is a great grocery chain here in Florida.
So one more point I want to make. One more take I want to make, Paul, and I want to dominate the conversation. The other real factor here is that and I make this argument to grocers all the time, that if a farm can deliver directly to the store without going through a warehouse or a distribution center or a packing center or palleted and repalleted, and by the time it ends on the grocery store, the water spraying on it, it's been handled by so many people, not to mention the huge environmental impact. So, by using a platform like Forager, we can allow a grocery store in a given geographic market, to buy from farms directly within a 50 or 100 mile radius. And they will get the food directly, as cleanly, as unprocessed, and as fresh and nutritious as any possible way.
For sure. Hey, Joe,
we're breaking the traditional supply chain.
Yeah, for sure. How many farms do you have on the network right now?
We have about 400. Right now. It's been growing quickly. Obviously, this spring saw some aggressive growth, and we know it's going to be going up from there quite quickly as well.
Have you? So obviously, you guys you're getting a lot of farms that come to you and kind of go in that direction. Are you seeing any kind of new age farms that are coming to you? Everything from hydro farming or vertical farming or box farming that are bringing products to market now, or is it mostly traditional?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's increasing the length of the season, the availability of so-called local, and of course now we're describing hyper-local product, and it's of a quality that is good enough for chefs in farm-to-table restaurants. So
for sure.
It's a very attractive area for growth with consumers, and we're getting a lot of farms that do that. Obviously, they tend to start in greens and herbs, but we're getting more diversity for sure.
Yeah. So we saw a trend.
Amazing, innovative things going on, Paul, and that just incredible. Around the growing season, besides the hydroponic, besides the vertical. I don't know, are you familiar with aquaponics at all, Paul?
Yes.
Okay, so, and there are just a slew of incredibly innovative people that have extended the growing seasons and just
pretty amazing. Is there any part of the country that has been more centralized in those kinds of farms that are populating? Has it been East Coast, West Coast, or pretty much all over?
It's pretty much all over, but I would say that the business case is best in areas that only have a limited growing season. So you see a lot more of it in colder climates of the U.S.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So far.
All right. So
Vermont and Maine are big leaders.
Right. I like and you guys probably love the point that what we saw here recently in the news was that some of the retailers were actually taking product directly from the restaurants in their local markets where they could sell their dishes and their pre-prepared foods right through a retail grocery chain. Mm-hmm. That seems to be a model that would work very well if the retail chains are starting to accept the local prepared foods. Why wouldn't they accept something that came from a farmer that's 15 minutes away from their dock? So that has to be great news for what you guys are doing for sure.
Absolutely, it's a good jumping off point, and it helps them envision what it would be like to work with those ingredients, not just the fully prepared thing, but to offer those ingredients to their consumer.
Right. So you guys have to go about the process of getting into the supply chain. Essentially, you're competing with a distributor model that's out there. That's a big infrastructure out there that you're competing against. It's the number one infrastructure. How do you plan to overcome this? Because That's basically David versus Goliath.
Literally in this case.
Do you want to take it, or you want me to start, or what do you want to do?
Why don't I get the first salvo in, and you can clean it up and augment it. How about that?
All right.
So the first thing I would say is that we are competing with distributors, but many distributors, not all, but many distributors view local food as a necessary evil or a nuisance. And those are my words, not anyone else's. But the idea is that they are trying to fulfill a customer requirement, but in a manner that doesn't fit very well with their overall model. And so the idea that we're competing directly with distributors, I think, is a little bit, it can be refined a little bit, that idea, to the fact that I think we're competing with a fundamentally different way of buying food that can't really adapt to local. And so the question that grocers face when they face that consumer that wants more local is, how do I make this happen in a way that is consistent with my model and still works with all of the requirements I have around profitability and store operations?
Mm-hmm. I could see that definitely working.
Can I add to that, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. Go right ahead.
I'll say two things. One is this is a long horizon effort. It is incredibly, I'm a serial startup entrepreneur, and this is one of the most difficult ones I've ever seen because of the entrenched behaviors and that have been existing in the back of the house grocery stores for decades. So it's a real challenge, which makes it fun and important. But getting back to the distributors, I was on the phone with Sodexo. Are you familiar with Sodexo, Paul?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So, they buy from Cisco. This is for the University of Maine system in Maine, who has a commitment to buy 20%. And she told me, that Cisco buys and aggregates. They don't go direct to farms. They buy from aggregators. So now you've got Cisco buying from aggregators, the aggregators maybe buying from farms, maybe buying from other aggregators, and they're so far removed that it's just it can't be that fresh and that local, no matter what they say. So there's some deception that goes on in the market, regrettably, around local. And we some of us call it farm to fable. And we thought about calling them out, but we don't, because we don't want to be that kind of a brand.
Well, I think consumers are starting to figure this out, because the curtain was kind of pulled away from what was happening when you had the shortage occur, because people were like, how could this even be possible? Right. Obviously, news agencies, et cetera. And now we've got documentaries coming out on this whole thing about how COVID has kind of unveiled the food system in the United States as basically an evil empire at the end of the day. That's what we're talking about. So with what's happening, when you look at the restaurant industry, let's just assume that, because essentially the restaurant industry is the catalyst for demand and has been for multi-decades. We've had almost 200,000 restaurants permanently closed in the United States in the last 5 months. This is the biggest hit that this industry has ever taken in the 75-year history of us really tracking, the industry tracking itself. So it is unparalleled in terms of how it's going to have ripple effects down into the food service chain and also the food supply chain. So you guys might be at the epicenter of a shift in where and how food is received by consumers in the future. I'm very intrigued in how this might work.
Yeah,
well, you're very articulate and very visionary yourself, Paul. Sorry, Joe.
That's okay.
And we'd love to have some of your brain power on the side if you're game on a second time. But go ahead.
So I was just going to say, I think. Oh, please go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
Go. You were saying you had a point there.
Yeah. I was going to share that we very much hope, and we intend to help fight for restaurants reopening, particularly farm-to-table restaurants that are trying to recover their role in the future of what we believe is the future of our food system. And so, that I do want to make that point up front. But yes, to your broader point, we do think that this is a cultural shift. Food is culture. And a lot of us are going to be, it's going to happen, I think, in phases. But what we are moving into right now, I think, is sort of a back to the future moment in our culture where we're going to rediscover some of the things that our grandparents did to run their lives, run their food lives, if you will. I can restate
no doubt
that.
about it. I mean, it's like the 1960s and 70s, really, if you think about it, all the way back to the milkman who delivered milk to my grandmother's house. It's just that kind of thing now.
So what's the modern version of this? That's what we're fighting for, right?
Yeah.
What's the modern version of it?
Well, two things. I tell the story when I do other interviews about, when I grew up, my grandparents were farmers. They were, they came from Eastern Europe right after World War I, and they walked. They were giving away land in Connecticut because we needed to feed, America after World War I. And they walked 90 miles to Connecticut and started a farm. And when I was growing up, we would go there to visit my grandparents. And I'm not making this up. My great uncle was the butcher. I hated going in there because it smelled. My cousin was the baker. We went and my other cousin was the chicken farmer. And my mother took me around, and that world has disappeared. Back to your other point, grocers and restaurants, like you said, are having to reinvent themselves. And you're seeing some great innovation, and you will see more. You will see more restaurants popping up at grocery stores and grocery parking lots. You'll see unique, metamorphoses happening between, farms and restaurants and grocers. Those that are clever and innovative will create these new models. And I think it's a really great opportunity for a change and potentially an opening in a different way. We always like to say, I don't remember who said it, let's not waste a crisis, right? So this could be, like you said, a real opportunity to help people connect even more so to their local food system than ever before.
Yeah. Last point here, and that is the product itself or your service. You've got a front side for the farms to be able to engage with you. I'm assuming they go online, they kind of plug in all their details, and they're up in your app. Is that kind of how it works?
That's how it works, yeah. Near real-time inventory, the ability to purchase immediately, and it's all integrated. So it's just fundamentally easier to use a product like this and organize a supply chain of vendors and suppliers than to do it the hard way, which is pick up the phone to synthesize emails and all these Excel spreadsheets. It's just endless work.
How has been the uptake from the retailer side? Because typically their systems, supply chain systems, are much more complicated, much more vast and dynamic because they're plugging into real-time inventory and just-in-time inventory. How do you guys deal with that?
Good question.
So we integrate. We give up. No. So we do integrate because those tools, they are very sophisticated, but at the same time, they don't account for local. A lot of these grocery stores, unfortunately, thus far haven't bought much local, and so they're not tuned into that supply chain. So there will be some build, but I think it's going to be mostly buy, and we're seeing a lot of interest in the space around partnering to solve local because of the feeling that it's just too difficult a problem to take the existing systems and the existing solutions they have and try and turn them to that.
So you're talking about not integrating, you're talking about reinventing an entire system. That
I think there is partial reinvention. I'm sorry to talk over you there, Paul. Sorry.
Not a problem.
We are talking about reinvention, but at the same time, we're talking about integrating as well. Taking an additional system that specializes in an aspect of the food chain that people feel like they completely lack expertise on, and integrating that into their back-end systems as a way of giving them an opportunity to ramp up local quickly.
Well, you guys picked something that sounds pretty easy to do then.
No, it isn't.
No problem.
Facetious. All right. Hey, it's been great having you guys on the show. Thanks so much for stopping in. It's been a good conversation.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much, Paul. Your viewers, you go to www.goforager.com. All right.
You got it. We'll drop that in there. We'll put it in the article that surrounds this video as well.
All right. Thanks.
All right. So you bet. So you guys are listening over on iTunes, maybe on Spotify. Make sure and drop us a link. Give us that review. That's how we kind of get feedback from our audience here, and it's how we learn a little bit more about what you're wanting to listen to or watch here on the Barron Report. Also, if you have a great idea, shoot us an email to producer@foodabletv.com. And then also you can hit me up on Twitter @PaulBarron, and feel free. I love the hate mail. It's coming. keep it coming. We love to listen to it. We'll see you guys next time right here on the Barron Report.